You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sometimes Weekly Sports and Stuff. I'm BJ Kissel, joined by a special guest this week and a good friend and somebody I've known for a very long time, it seems, and former Chiefs long snapper, sideline reporter, public speaker. I think, Kendall, you do a little bit of everything. We're talking with Kendall Gammon. You guys, if you're listening to the show, you probably know Kendall, but man, it's always good to see you, my friend.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, I try to do a lot of things that way nobody knows where I'm actually supposed to be. So it's nice. I don't know if you mentioned it or not, because you mentioned several, but I'm also the assistant to the president at Pittsburgh State University. And so I got to mention my gorillas, even though I know you're a Wildcat, but you've got some mule in you as well. So yeah, absolutely.
It's always fun to rib each other back and forth. You let me know what's going on in the MIAA, and I always appreciate that. Before we get into this, I'm excited to have this conversation. You and I talk a lot anyway. To have this kind of one of the discussions that we have had before, kind of having on a podcast / YouTube show. I'm excited about. But before we do that, I do want to thank our sponsor here in Holiday Distillery. If you're listening to this episode and you're in the Kansas City area, or you're going to be in the Kansas City area and you're looking for a cool spot to go hang out, have an event, whatever you've got, head up to Weston, Missouri. It's about 40 minutes northwest of Kansas City, and check out Holiday Distillery. Great people up there. They just have their new Ben Holiday bottle and bonded bourbon that came out just a couple months ago that has been flying off the shelves. Great people, great products, and very happy to have them as a sponsor. So go check them out. Tell them that KC Sports Network sent you. You might notice when you get up there the giant neon for KC Sports Network up in their welcome center, but we appreciate everything from Holiday. Now, Kendall, one of the things I wanted to start in just talking about, because you have such a unique perspective in being around the game in so many different ways. And I know it's a loaded question, but just to start, what is some of the most important things that you took and that you learned as a player during your, very long NFL career that has served you well, in the post, NFL life and business and all the different things that you have going on?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting that you talk about that, because I'm going to speak about it here next week at the Intercontinental for American Pyrotechnics Association meeting. But it's really, leadership and creating a mindset and being intentional with it. And I talk about the fact, and I won't go into it all, but my first 4 years, I was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 11th round, 291st person taken. So yeah, right away feeling really good about myself. But all the same, Coach Cowher and how he treated me that preseason was tough, but he thickened my skin. And that was the one thing that I learned right away is you've got to have that thick skin to get through things, because people are going to say things. There's no law against people saying things for the most part. And if it doesn't affect you, then you've just got to let it go, because otherwise, if you let it noodle up in your brain a little bit, your brain just takes it and runs with it, because our brains in general, our minds in general, try to be cautious and they try to protect us, and they have to be. That's what they're made to do. But if it goes too haywire, then all of a sudden you just get in this little rut where you're afraid to do anything. You're afraid to say anything. You're afraid you're going to offend people. And that's not just the case. But that being said, you've got to understand that people are going to do those things, and you just deal with it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, because so many of our conversations have been about, comparing, not eras specifically, but just about, back in our day, it was just a little bit different. Now, whether the context is social media and just how, everybody's got a phone, everybody's a journalist nowadays.
Yeah, exactly.
How that would be different for players back in the day. But then even going back to, and I made this mistake, and I want to say it was either Anthony Davis or Danon Hughes. It was one of the ambassadors who's around quite a bit. And I remember at training camp years ago when I was working for the Chiefs, making a comment, or I was interviewing him on training camp day about, it was like Chiefs alumni day and everybody was back. And I said, Andy Reid runs a tough camp. Like, how would you think you would do in like one of these tough camps? And he looked me dead in the eye.
Would be just fine.
He looked me dead in the eye and just kind of let me have it a little bit, and not disrespectful, but he was just like, you understand, we did like 2 a days in like pads, and like we were hitting all day long, and it wasn't like it is now at the NFLPA and everything easy. So like, yes, they're very organized, efficient. There's not a lot of conditioning at the end because the conditioning is during practice because they do a lot of reps, they go fast. But as far as being difficult on a body, it's not even close. And so I don't make those comments. I never brought that up again to a former player about training camps. But what are some of the differences that you see? And how much do you think about the era as just being different? What players nowadays have to deal with on the outside, but then also financially, it's a completely different, situation now as well. So there's give and take.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a great point. And I look at it playfully. I mean, when people bring it up, because they don't know any better, or the players don't know any better now of what it used to be like. And, I don't want to bring the walked uphill both ways in the snow to school story all the time, but it was different. I know even Vermeil's another story. We'll get to that one. But with Ditka, who I played for 3 years with the Saints, I know at one point in time, we had 14 straight days of 2-a-days in pads. I think now you cannot have more than 2 2-a-days in a row, and only one of those can be in pads. So it has changed a lot. And I don't begrudge him and everything, because those there weren't any rules against it. But I think the one change we've seen now is, you mentioned the money, and the guys are getting paid astronomical amounts of money. And that's just a product of time. But if that's the case, then you need to take care of those bodies. And in the past, it was really up to the whim of the head coach or the strength and conditioning coordinator, weight coach, of what guys would weigh and how they would work out. There was no science to it. Now there's a science to it, and the testing. So it's just evolved, just like everything. It evolves and it gets to a higher level. And how it is now is much easier. And I can see where a lot of old school coaches, or coaches in general, wish they had maybe more contact, more this, more that. And that might be true. They've tried to reach a happy medium. And the big thing is they've tried to close all the loopholes so that everybody has the same rules and they have to adhere to them. And I think that's really huge. I would say this, and I would say that Coach Vermeil, that I played for 5 years, had a lot to do this, and he would understand it, which he believed that if you're going to play 3 hours on Sunday, you ought to practice 3 hours and get used to it. And it's just not the same. We used to talk about Vermeil years being, it was Vermeil years, dog years, it's the same kind of thing. And it is what it is. So it has definitely changed quite a bit. But it's the rules that are there. You adhere by them, and the game has changed. There's no doubt about it. And the last thing I would say, BJ, was we talked about the money. The guys that play my position now get paid so much more than I did. And I see other players and they get mad about that. I'm like, that's how it's been. I mean, when I was playing, I was getting paid more than the guys that played 10 years before me. It's just a function of time. And so I think you just have to deal with it and understand that that's always going to continue to keep rising. And there's no reason to get bitter about things that you simply cannot change, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because it just brings up the stories of hearing about the guys, back in the day when the Chiefs won their first Super Bowl and guys had, off-season jobs and they were doing different things. They weren't going to have a lot of, sympathy for guys that didn't have to have, second jobs. And now it's like, these players' kids don't necessarily have to have jobs by the time they get older.
You're right. It's generational. It's generational money if you handle it the right way for the stars. Now, for the other guys, they've got to work. I mean, I had to work. I played 15 years, which, less than 80 people have played that long in the NFL out of about 25,000 that have come through the NFL. So I beat the odds, but I still had to work. Plus, when I got out of the league at age 37, almost 38, I was now 15 years behind. So I had to figure out what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. And as I always say, it was the best temporary job I could ever have. I was just renting that seat. And then eventually the shield wins out. Father Time never loses, and they just keep going.
Yeah. All right, Kendall, right now we're going to take a quick word. Tucker's got a quick word from DraftKings for us right now. We'll be right back.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but the NFL action is in full swing here at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And that's right, we're talking touchdowns, we're talking big plays, and even bigger payout wins. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. Listen, if that's not enough, DraftKings got you covered. Everyone can boost their winnings with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Right now, for every leg that you add, you can boost your winnings up to 100%. That's right. I paused a little bit because I had to make sure that was true. Right now, for every leg that you add, you can boost your winnings up to 100%. With bigger payouts than ever, why would you bet on football anywhere else? To make things even sweeter, you can throw down on stepped-up same-game parlays once per game day, all season long. That's right, all season long. Here's what you got to do. You got to go to DraftKings Sportsbook and download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Now, use promo code KCSN to get $200 in free bets if your team wins when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code KCSN only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. You can see the show notes for more details. Now, let's get back to the show.
Kendall, I don't know how much you get into the gambling, but we've joked about this before because it seems like you get on social media right now, just with, gambling being illegal in Kansas, that it's absolutely everywhere. Obviously, we're Team DraftKings here at KC Sports Network. I know you've got different companies that you work with, but how much in that regard have you seen the kind of game change over time? And I keep asking you these questions just because you've got such a unique perspective in playing for so long, and then with the Chiefs Radio Network for so long, and being around it, understanding what's going on, and even now you still have a pulse on what's going on out there. How do you see kind of the sports gambling specifically around Kansas City just kind of changing things, both from a player, coach, just way that the game is talked about and the content that's created for it, but then also just from a fan perspective of you can't get on social media right now and just not get inundated with all this stuff?
No, which that, to your last point, that just shows you how valuable getting somebody on a certain platform is. And as you said, DraftKings is a platform that you guys deal with a lot, and is obviously a great platform. It's interesting because I look back at my career. We were not allowed to play any golf tournaments or things like that if they were associated with a casino. We couldn't accept a free room or anything like that. I would say as short as maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the NFL made, or maybe a little bit more than that, made the comment that there will never be a football team in Las Vegas. We know what's going on there with that. They were very concerned about the betting side of things and the players, and they had right to be. There's no doubt about that one. But it's interesting now that it's all been embraced. And then for those who don't know, I mean, the injury report has been done and has always been done for one reason, and that's for the betting side of things. So don't kid yourself there. The NFL understood it, and I'm not getting on the NFL for that, but there's been some mixed messages, and that happens in any industry. But I do think it's fun. I think when done the right way, and it's not done out of control and everything, it's fun to put $5 or $10 on a game, or even more if you can afford that and it works that way. It's great to win, never fun to lose. It's interesting how close these odds makers get to things and how it comes down to the last person with the ball and things of that nature. But I think it's a good thing overall. It's been a mixed message for several years, but now I think we're seeing it go mainstream.
Yeah. I remember when I was at the Chiefs, we had so many different tutorials and different things that we had to sign and videos we had to watch about, like, you can't go in a sports book. Like, you're an NFL employee for a team. Like, you can't get near a sports book. And now it just seems completely, how are Vegas employees? The first thing I thought about when they took the teams of how are they going to live there? The full-time staffers, the few hundred people that work for the organization, going to completely avoid every sports book in Vegas. So obviously those things are going to change a little bit, but yeah, I think you bring up a great point in that, we've had comments and people before talking about, people have different, opinions on sports gambling, which everybody has, a right to, how they feel about it. They have different perspectives and things like that. But to your point, there is nothing more accurate out there. There's no more emphasis put on being correct with a projection than the lines for a game. This is not, Skip Bayless and, Shannon Sharp just kind of prognosticating different things. And you don't know if they're trying to disagree just for the sake of disagreeing. to try to make a point. Or, you know, right now it seems like, and we've talked about this a lot on the network, there's a lot of people and a lot of platforms out there that will intentionally bait Chiefs fans with content regarding Patrick Mahomes being the 8th best player. And I know there's more to that, but things like that they know will cause engagement on social media, which is what they're looking for. And so like you bait people like that and we give them that engagement. And so like that part of it has always been, you know, lately a struggle to kind of deal with, because you want to create content, you want to do those things,
right?
But it's almost disingenuous at this point, in that the spirit behind why you're doing it isn't necessarily why you're doing it. And Chiefs fans kind of buy into that stuff more than other fan bases. And we say, like, don't interact with bad tweets, screenshot them, don't retweet them, and don't do all of those things. But yeah, the lines are the most accurate version because there's so much money involved. Like talking millions, billions of dollars of those lines having to be correct. So it's not just somebody's opinion. It's not fishing for engagement. It is, this has to be right, or casino could lose a lot of money.
They could, and it is an exact science. It's done. It's a business. It's treated as such. Obviously, these casinos do not build themselves. I mean, losers or winners don't build the casinos. The losers do, and that's part of it. And quite honestly, they just assume it. You know, we all know it. They just assume half the money be on one side and half the other, so they don't have to pay out. And they just take, you know, they take that 10% or whatever it is, and that's a pretty good income when you've got millions, if not quite honestly billions, bet on certain things. So it is what it is. I mean, I think it's fun. You know, I had, like the last game, the Thursday night game, I had a little bit of money on Jody Fortson catching a touchdown pass. I thought that was a decent bet. He got one pass in the goal in the red zone. If the ball had been put up a little bit more, it was a nice matchup. It didn't happen. Now I had a little enough money on it that I could just laugh and say, "Well, there's my chance. I almost got it, but I didn't." But you know, it's those kind of things, and that's just another reason that the NFL is so popular. I think the other thing too that's been going on, betting's always been going on. Everybody's got a guy, but the other thing too, with the rise of fantasy football, that brought a whole new light to the NFL, and the fantasy football overtook trading cards and a lot of different things as the number one revenue source for the NFLPA and what was going on. And it was just enormous and is only going to continue to grow. And it just, you're adding different, you're just adding different tabs to the game that you can, or pages of the game that you can turn, and different ways that you can look at the game. And that's why, quite honestly, it's so important for the teams to create a good game day experience, because they're coming there, but they're not going to just pay attention to their team. They need to pay attention to the whole NFL, which is what they want. And therefore you've got to have great Wi-Fi coverage and things of that nature. And you've got to define it, because quite honestly, in this day and age with the technology, also, you've got this high def TV, which is like looking through a window, and you don't have to fight traffic and yada, yada, yada. So there's some definite challenges for the live game.
Yeah, it's interesting to bring that up. And this is probably the nerdy stuff. I don't know how many people care about this, but it's kind of like peeling looking behind the curtain of how things work. And I think in my path to joining the Chiefs and working there for the 6 years I was there, the things that I found most fascinating weren't necessarily like the juicy gossip type things. It was just the processes. It was how much went into everything and how many people are involved. You talk about game day entertainment. For Brad Young and Anna Tobkin and Kristen Pugh and that whole crew behind the scenes, and then a ton of freelancers and the rest of 65 TPT, Rob Alberino overseeing all of it now. They do, and Steph Judah down there with the cheerleaders understanding the breaks and the Aerovision, and that it's this huge production. I think a lot of people would be really surprised about how much work it really takes to do and put that entire control room. You walk in there on a game day, people are running. I know you've been in there. People running.
It's mission control. It's NASA. It's mission control.
And when they do the flyovers to coordinate when the plane is flying over and communicating, and Kristen on the phone with them and making sure the timing and the weather and the visibility, there is so much to it that it's really a beautiful, it's a beautiful dance to be back there to quote Andy Reid, the way he talks about O-line, D-line, but it's really cool to see how it all goes behind the scenes. And you bring up the point about technology and social media now, one of the things that we always ran into as far as just creating processes between the game day experience for the fans, the broadcast talk, putting the game out to millions of people.
Right.
And then social media, even on things like injury updates, like a player is questionable to return. The process in which who gets that information first takes like 100 meetings of people that get paid a whole lot more money than we did, of like, how are you going to do this? Are we going to give it to the broadcast first? And it was like, no, it needs to go in stadium first. Okay, how are we going to broadcast it in stadium? So at Arrowhead, it's on that ribbon. It's on the little ribbon that goes all the way around the stadium. That's where the injuries update's going to go. And as soon as they see it there, they give it to the broadcast, and then they give it to Chief Social, which always comes from the main account first, but it's PR coming down. You can hear the phone ring. I know every time like the phone rings, somebody's hurt, and then you just look down there to gauge the reaction of Ted or Brad, whoever answers the phone, to see like how bad was that injury? Are they out? Are they questionable? What's going on? And they have like the bat line to do that. It's crazy. All of the processes, all the different things that go into place, and all the different factors that people have to bring in and variables.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing the run of show. Every company has an org chart and goes on down, but I assume there's an org chart, as you mentioned, for information and how it filters down also. And that's such a huge deal for so many different reasons, quite honestly.
Hey, sorry to interrupt this podcast, but I've got to tell you about our friends at Liquid Death. You may start noticing that there are strange tall boys of beer in the bottled water section of your local store. Well, fear not, it's not actually beer. It really is mountain spring water from the Alps, and it's called Liquid Death. Liquid Death. Why is it called Liquid Death, you're asking me? Well, it's because it'll brutally murder your thirst. That's what it says here on my sheet. And their infinitely recyclable tallboy cans are helping bring death to plastic bottles. Something that you just absolutely love to see. They also donate 10% of their profits from every can sold to help kill plastic pollution. Love to see that as well. So this is what you got to do. You got to go to Liquid Death and find it at your local Woodman's, 7-Eleven, Roundy's, or Hy-Vee. I go to the Hy-Vee gas by my house here. I see it everywhere. Good stuff. It's in sparkling water. It's in just regular water. You can find it anywhere. At Hy-Vee specifically is where I get it. Or you can go to Liquid Death and find a retailer using their store locator tool at liquiddeath.com/KCSN. That's liquiddeath.com/KCSN.
Yeah, Kendall, now I want to switch gears here a little bit and just talk about the current team. You and I talk about it every week. We do the pregame stuff that you host with 101 The Fox, that we join our guy Sparks, and I go on a couple times a week with Slacker, and Marlia Campbell joins us as well, and they have Steve Gorman. They have a bunch of different guests. It's a lot of fun to do that. So we get a chance to share our thoughts and opinions on the Chiefs each week. But for the team right now, that game Thursday night, you and I talked about it. We talked a lot about Orlando Brown and the opportunity that he had. Don't know if it moved the needle a whole lot one way or another. I think that both sides of the Orlando Brown, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa can feel like they did their best. But just big picture, how do you feel about this team 2 weeks in compared to what you thought maybe at the beginning of training camp when they were just getting going?
You know what? I think they're as advertised. They're certainly one of the top teams, if not the top team in the NFL. I think it's really refreshing. Not that it's not refreshing hearing from Coach Reed, but Steve Spagnuolo, he gives you some pretty well thought out answers, and quite honestly, more information than a lot of coaches will give. And the one that he talked about was with the defense being young, which I think he is certainly okay with saying that's not his favorite thing. And I can understand that, but in his hopes that the athleticism and the speed of the team would overcome the mistakes and the baptism by fire. And I think we're seeing that a little bit, which is a team that is quick, that runs to the ball well. Certainly this week is going to be an issue with Willie Gay being out, but somebody will step in. And that's the other thing too, I think, is just how the Chiefs conduct themselves. And it's always the next man up, but they really seem to do it well. And that's just, to me, that's the mark of a well-coached team at really every level.
Kid, I've probably said this on every podcast we've had almost, or at least all the ones that I've been on, that, with everything that the AFC West teams did, with what the Broncos did, bringing in Russell Wilson and signing, Randy Gregory, and then the Raiders obviously trading for Devontae Adams, and then signing Chandler Jones, and then obviously the Chargers, JC Jackson, and trading for Khalil Mack. Everybody went all in. And it was to try to go after the team that had won the division for 6 straight years.
Right.
And it was historic and almost unprecedented in the way that one division particularly loaded up. Now, every team's going to try to do their best to do what they can. And they know the Chiefs are the best team in the division. They're going to do everything they can to improve their team. But the fact that it all happened, it seemingly in like a week, where it's just like, what the hell is happening? Is this collusion that the entire NFL is just like, you know what? We're not going to let the Chiefs win the division anymore. We're coming after them. That I have said that when the Chiefs win the division again, I'm going to be insufferable. And Kendall, you know me pretty well. I'm pretty low key, but knowing what the AFC West did and how much they loaded up and came after us, still go out there and to win, it's going to be the ultimate, it's what Twitter was made for. We'll just say that.
Right.
Chiefs, there are a lot of fakes. There's a lot of receipts out there from what people have been saying to go and respond to. And there's a lot of great content creators. I'm sure 65 TPT has a folder of all of the anti-Chiefs takes just sitting there waiting for all the hype videos for the preseason or for the postseason. But as we sit here today, that game on Thursday, I'm interested to get your takes. We haven't done our pregame stuff for 101 yet.
Right.
So curious what your thoughts were, because during the game, it was frustrated. The offense wasn't getting going. Thought Patrick Mahomes got away with some stuff that it wouldn't have been surprising for those, a couple of those plays that turned out more negative than they were, just throwing late across the middle and he's getting hit. Some things that just not good play. But the fact that the Chiefs didn't play particularly well, and a lot of that had to do with the Chargers being pretty good at what they do. But the fact that they didn't play well and the Chargers still couldn't come out with a victory when everything kind of seemingly fell the way they needed to for the Chargers to have a path to win in Kansas City, the fact that it still didn't happen has got to be a tough pill to swallow for them.
It definitely is, because in their mind, and I've been there on those teams before, in their mind, they're like, okay, if it wasn't for that, that interception, that pick six, we had him, and we got a bad call here or there. When you have two great teams playing that are playoff teams, I always say it comes down to 6 or 7 plays in a game, even if it's a bad team that you're playing. But there it came down to just a couple plays being made by one team or the other. I've heard a lot of people say, well, if you didn't have that pick six, well, that's right. But also on the other side of it, if you didn't have that long bomb for the touchdown, or if you didn't have the long run, you can always say if you didn't have this play, but the fact is you did have those plays, and those plays were made. And it's really a testament to just the fortitude of the Chiefs and not giving up defensively down there. Again, I mean, I can't think of a better person to go after than a 7th round pick defensive back who was working in Wendy's a few years ago. Yet he steps in and makes the play, and really that ball should have been thrown away. It was supposed to be a back shoulder throw. It just wasn't exactly where it needed to be. He stepped in, he made the play, and he took it the distance. And that's the fine line for your playoff teams. Most of the time, I think I remember this from Vermeil. Most of the time, playoff teams playing other playoff teams, it's 50-50. To get to the playoffs, basically what you have to do is you have to make sure and you beat those teams that are not making the playoffs, or those teams that have a low winning percentage, and you can't slip up against those and know that it's going to go either way, because that game was 3 or 4 plays and it could have gone either way. And I mean, you can make the case, and maybe it is in some power rankings, that those are the 2 best teams in the NFL. I mean, it was one of those games. It was a playoff atmosphere at the Arrowhead, and it was a fun thing. This is a fun era to be a part of Chiefs Kingdom, no doubt.
Yeah, when you look at the AFC, the Chargers are up there. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills are up there as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of the power rankings, I mean, those are 3 of the better teams. I do think it has been kind of surprising. This has been, narratives that have started to be discussed, and we put out there that the AFC West was going to be the best division in football, and haven't really seen that from the Broncos. Now, I fully expect them to turn around a little bit, although the things that are concerning about the Broncos, like coaching decisions, which Brennan Staley, during his young coaching career, has been criticized for as well, which was one of those storylines coming out of the game on last Thursday, was that he had been so aggressive every other time that they had played. It felt like he overcorrected and was a lot more conservative than when you expected, and then it didn't work out. So I think mentally he might be in a blender a little bit about what to do in some of those decisions as far as being aggressive or not, which obviously hindsight's always 20/20. You make the right decisions. It's great. And if not, I liken that to, Coach Reed's red zone creative play calling. When it works, everyone calls him a genius. And when it doesn't, they say he's getting too cute. And he shouldn't do that kind of stuff. So, Kendall, before we let you go, and you mentioned Jalen Watson and the Wendy's story, and I know a lot of people have talked about it, a lot of people have written about that. going to give you a platform, and I'm putting you on the spot here. So anybody listening knows that Kendall was not given this ahead of time. So I'll make the question very long to give you time to think about it. But you played for a long time. You're around a lot of guys with, I'm sure, a lot of great stories. A story kind of, not necessarily just like that, but is there anybody that you played with or played against who had a story that you think should be a movie? And the reason I ask that is nowadays with media being and everybody being so open and everybody's stories being out there and a lot in self-branding and, you know, getting your story out there kind of brands you as a player and makes you more attractive for, you know, marketing opportunities. And it's just, there's a lot more incentive to get your story out there than there was even 15, 20 years ago. So we kind of know a lot, almost everything, more than we need to know about players today. And their personal lives and things like that. Is there anybody that you played with that had a story that you're just like, man, that is crazy? And now looking back saying, if that guy had a movie made about him, it would not be altogether that surprising to me. Is there anybody that jumps out to you?
You know, I started to go with Kevin Green. He's in Pro Football Hall of Fame, passed away a couple of years ago, my teammate with the Steelers. And then one just came to me, and that's Carlton Hasselrig. Do you know that name?
I do not.
Okay, so Carlton Hasselrig, he wrestled at Pittsburgh Johnstown. He was a 4-time national champion in Division II. And back at the time, they allowed them to go wrestle Division I also. And I think he was a 2-time national champion at Division I as well. He almost made the Olympics, never played football. He got drafted in the 12th round, I believe, by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was on the practice squad a year, and then he was a backup a year. And then he started his 3rd year, which was my rookie year with the Steelers. And either that year or the next year, he made the Pro Bowl. And now as a wrestler, understanding center of gravity and balance and everything, he would make people look silly. And he was freaky strong. It was unreal. He was a good probably 300, 295, ran like a deer, strong as an ox. Quite honestly, he was a little bit out there. And you know, I always say this, the NFL is a violent game, and violent people don't come from Beverly Hills. They come from violent places and have bad situations. And I think he had kind of a bad situation. But I think that would be a good story because of all of that. But then you take into account, unfortunately, that he got hurt. And that's the worst thing that that's the biggest problem that guys have in the NFL is when they get hurt and they don't know what to do with their time. And it's not portioned like it was. And he got into some troubles, and even I think he passed away here 3 or 4 years ago. I'd heard stories about him being a little bit off, you know, driving his motorcycle all around through places he shouldn't and stuff like that. It'd be an inspiring story and probably a sad story as well. But that's certainly one that comes to mind. Justin Strelzik, who had the CTE, and he was part of the story, the concussion in there. He was a teammate of mine. That would be one. And then, of course, Kevin Green, as I mentioned. But, yeah, that's probably the first one, Carlton. That was probably more than you were looking for. But that's one that most people don't know about.
And I didn't even think about it until I asked the question, because I was thinking about somebody also that, you know, Chiefs fans might know, and he's on our network here at KC Sports. He's a co-host of The Breakdown with Matt Hamilton, who's a producer for Good Morning Football, and that's Matt Kessel. And I know Chiefs fans, you know, it didn't have a lot of success when Kessel was here. There was a lot of drama, a lot of things going on. And everyone I had talked to in the organization, and I'd say this before Matt joined us, he's been awesome to work with. But everybody in that organization would say nothing bad about Matt Kessel. He was just kind of the guy that had to deal with the tornado and all the stuff going around him in the organization at the time. But for him to barely play at USC, play quarterback, sitting behind Carson Palmer, behind Matt Leinart. You know, his lone collegiate start was at H-back, played a little tight end, played like special teams on the hands team. For that guy to make a Pro Bowl in the NFL at quarterback and throw for 17,000 yards in his career after throwing for 192 yards in college. At that position is absolutely crazy. And I know Chiefs fans can feel the way they do about the success the team did or didn't have when he was here. But from somebody that, just put yourselves in the shoes of somebody that grew up watching him play in high school, go to USC, not play a lot, get drafted in the 7th round, and get that opportunity when Bernard Pollard took out Tom Brady's knee that year. And then Kessel got a shot, made a Pro Bowl, and then got paid. and then bounced around as backup on some different teams, and now helps us break down film and does a show. KC Sports Network's always watching the Chiefs, but it's another one, man. That's just, those are the stories that are really, really cool to me.
Well, and I think one, and I don't want to take us too long, but if you talk about a coach, Bill Cowher, who was a former defensive coordinator here, just went into the Hall of Fame this last year or the last couple of years. My coach with Pittsburgh, the first 4 years of my career, I think he was the youngest head coach at the time at 34, but, came out of North Carolina State. He was a special teams player with Cleveland. He stuck there 3 or 4 years, but really only played special teams. And then right after that, went right in as a special teams coach with Marty Schottenheimer with Cleveland, which was really bucking the trend a little bit for him to do what he did and get to where he was and get the Super Bowl and get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I think that's an amazing story. And I bet there's a boatload of stories like that.
Yeah. I'm sure guys become the best in the world at what they do. There's going to be a story there. And to your point, most of them, it wasn't because they had everything handed to them. It wasn't because the path was easy. It was in fact because it wasn't, that they kind of weeded out the guys who really, really wanted it. And, one of those lines that we always use around the draft is, does this guy like football, or does he like what football can do for him?
Right.
And is that guy, does he like football, or does he like the fact that he's just really good at football right now when he's the biggest and the baddest, where he's been? So we'll get more of those stories, man. We'll definitely have you on another one of these episodes. Always enjoy talking to you, and enjoy everybody out there for listening to this episode. You can catch the rest of our content at KC Sports Network as the Chiefs get ready to take on the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday. It's the Colts home opener as they tied week 1 against the Texans and then got blanked 24-0 by the Jacksonville Jaguars. So a little different opponent for the Chiefs. But Kendall, I think you actually may have been the one to tell me this, as we'll use this to take us home. But somebody told me never underestimate an embarrassed professional athlete.
Do not back an NFL team. Yeah, don't back a wounded animal into the corner. They come out fighting, and that's something that most people really pay attention to in the NFL. Any given Sunday is true.
These are prideful guys in that defensive line, and we know Chris Ballard's going to fill a team full of guys up front that can get after it. So should be a good one, despite everything else that's going on. But Chiefs go out and play well. Expect them to win on Sunday. And again, we'll have more content for you here at KC Sports Network. For myself, BJ Kissel, and Kendall Gammon, we appreciate you for listening to this episode of Sometimes Weekly Sports and Stuff.